What's up, guys, and welcome to another episode of Player Pool. Going to break down the DraftKings player pool for the main slate this week and try to find some picks that we can put into our player pool. It's going to be a weird week as far as games. There are no real matchups between teams that stand out, but that might help us out with building our lineups this week, and I'll get into it after this. What's up, guys? Simon Edwards at PumaCom here with Heat Seeker Sports, and you're watching Player Pool. I'm going to break down the DraftKings main slate and take a look at these games and run through the players to find out, whose matchups stand out the most. And like I said at the top, it's an interesting week because none of these games really stand out from a fantasy matchup perspective, which is going to make it a week where the ownership should be spread out, but it seems like it's not really the case. So that'll give us a chance to get different with our lineup building this week. Before I get into that, make sure to hit the like button. I'm looking for 30 likes to trigger a shorter video, a little bit closer to lock. You're going to want to subscribe to the channel and sign up for alerts in order to get the alerts when those short videos come out. And usually it's an hour or two before lock. Lately, YouTube's been taking forever to upload, so check out TikTok too, an hour or two before lock. I'm looking for those 30 likes to trigger that video. Make sure to subscribe to the channel because I need to hit 1,200 subscribers. I'm hoping to hit that by the end of week 10. I'm about 80 subscribers short of that, so if you guys can hit subscribe, that'd be a huge help. And then that's how you also sign up for your alerts. So let's dig into this player pool here. The first game that's over is going to be Pittsburgh versus Washington. This is a game. We got some rain concerns in this one. Russell Wilson, I think he's got small hand syndrome, but I don't know if the rain is going to be enough to affect whether or not we want to play him. But Russell Wilson against Washington. Washington's been a lot better against the pass recently. Washington started off rough. It started off as a weekly target for us, but lately their defense has gotten stronger, and they just picked up Marshawn Lattimore on top of it. And Dan Quinn, as their head coach, ran that really good defense in Dallas for a few years, and now you see what the result of Dallas is after Dan Quinn left the team, and you're starting to see Washington come around a little bit. Russell Wilson, though, at 5,900 is interesting against a team that should be able to put up points on Pittsburgh, even though Pittsburgh's defense is strong. So Russell Wilson isn't a guy that I want to write off, especially at 5,900. But just keep in mind the matchup might be a little more difficult than it has been. Jaden Daniels on the other side, he's got the tougher matchup against Pittsburgh, Steve, but Pittsburgh, their defense hasn't faced anyone too daunting. So that gives some hope for Jaden Daniels. Let's see what Jaden Daniels' ownership is this week. Jaden Daniels, under 10% owned on top of that. So if this game ends up being interesting, then Jaden Daniels will go low owned in it. He's at 7,500 though, so very expensive considering the matchup. Let's go into running backs. Robinson is out. That's another plus for Jaden Daniels this week because, without Robinson, that might put more work on Jaden Daniels to do some more running. Najee Harris has been on fire recently. As far as the matchup for Najee Harris, Washington is giving up 21.2 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. So Najee is set up to have a decent, middling type of matchup in this one. If we do think that Pittsburgh is going to be competitive, that would make him a little interesting. But 6,200, he's getting a little bit, well, I guess that's not too expensive, but he's getting more expensive than, I would like. Eckler, likely to be the lead back in this one. Last week with Robinson out, he had 11 attempts for 42 yards and a touchdown, ended up with 17 DraftKings points because he gets that passing work on top of it. He's only 5,800, so I kind of like Eckler in this one. See if I can get an idea of Eckler's ownership this week. See if he's close to the top. I see him at, he's reasonable. He's under 15%. So Eckler at 5,800 in this matchup is pretty good. Pretty good price there. And again, the Pittsburgh D giving up 20.8 DraftKings points a game to running backs. Pittsburgh D has actually been susceptible to wideouts. They're giving up 21 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. Just confirm that real quick. Now they're giving up 21 points to wideouts. They're giving up 13.6 to slot receivers. So just going to confirm that too, because that seems a little bit low for Pittsburgh, lower than I would expect. Let's see. Pittsburgh, 13.6 and 21. So that's actually like that's actually a pretty good matchup for wideouts and slots against this Pittsburgh defense. It's a top 10 matchup. I would expect Pittsburgh to be a more difficult matchup, but looks like teams have been putting up points through the air on them, despite the quarterbacks only getting 12.5 DraftKings points. That's going to make some of these players here on the Washington side, the receivers here, interesting. It's going to make McLaurin interesting. It's going to make Noah Brown interesting at 4,300. I like Noah Brown a lot at 4,300, especially the way that he's been playing so far. He had 6 targets in each of the last 2 weeks. He had that long touchdown Hail Mary grab that beat Chicago in week 8. So, he's been one of their more reliable receivers, and he's only at 4,300, and he finds himself in this matchup that should be beneficial to him this week. Let me see if I can find something, some kind of a nugget on Noah Brown this week. I do like Noah Brown. I've liked him the last few weeks. I just haven't found the right spot to play him in. I did not play him when he scored that bomb, unfortunately. But let me check out and see if I can find an interesting nugget on Noah Brown real quick here. All right, let's see. All right, so according to Rich Rebar, Pittsburgh's had more success against wide receiver 1s, and they've kind of left the door open for wide receiver 2s. So that's probably where we're seeing that, those points being scored against Pittsburgh. That makes Noah Brown even more interesting to me, much more than McLaurin at 7,300. I like Noah Brown here at 4,300, and that is going to, definitely put him in my player pool this week. So Noah Brown, keep Noah Brown in mind this week against Pittsburgh. As far as tight ends, none of these guys have a good matchup against each other. Both teams are just middling against tight ends, but none of these guys are getting the volume anyways to make them worthwhile. Pickens could be interesting against Washington. Washington did have the weakness against the wideouts earlier in the year, but like right now, they're only giving up 14.7 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. So that is not good for Pickens. But if you're going to start Russell Wilson, if you're going to tell a story of him scoring enough points to be in the optimal lineup this week on the DraftKings main slate, then it would make a lot of sense to put Pickens in there with him. Pickens can beat, contested matchups and everything like that. And this is a game where they should be playing from behind. So I wouldn't be surprised to see Pickens have a decent game, but he doesn't have the best matchup. All right, so let's go over to New England versus Chicago. New England versus Chicago is interesting to me. I like Drake May. Drake May he's been pretty good these last at least 3 out of the last 4 weeks. He had 11 DraftKings points against the Jets. Jets are a tough defense. Chicago's not an easy defense either, but let's see what they're giving up for DraftKings points. Chicago's given up 11.1 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, so that's not the best matchup for Drake May, but he does have running upside. New England, on the other hand, has been giving up 15.4 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, but they've been giving up 21.4 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. It's an interesting situation in Chicago. Chicago is DJ Moore walked off the field mid-play last week when Caleb Williams was scrambling. He claimed it was because his ankle was tweaked. He ended up getting 9 targets, 4 receptions for 33 yards. He's pulling some diva behavior recently, which we see a lot. DJ Moore has been, his body language, everything about him, is kind of indicating that he's not happy in his role, or he's not happy on the team, and that could set things up maybe for Rome Odunze at 5,200 to have a better game. Odunze, he hit 104 yards last week. His first time, looks like second time over 100 yards this season. And he had 7 targets, 5 receptions in that game, 18.4 DraftKings points. Not enough to put him on people's radar. But if DJ Moore is acting difficult on the team, then you see Rome Odunze getting some opportunity here. Keenan Allen, as far as the matchup for Keenan Allen, New England is only giving up 7.9 DraftKings points a game to the slot. So if I was gonna use anyone in the passing, weapons here, it'd probably be Rome Odunze. As far as the running backs in this game, both of them have a pretty decent matchup. DeAndre Swift has been on fire recently. He has all those games over 20 DraftKings points, and he finds himself in another good matchup this week where New England is giving up 26.4 DraftKings points a game to the running back position, and it's a game where they are heavy favorites. Well, they're 6.5 point favorites over New England. If you wanted to run out with Drake May, then maybe a good guy to run him back with would be DeAndre Swift, or maybe even Rome Odunze. If you wanted to run out a Caleb Williams stack with Odunze and maybe Swift, you could run it back with Ramondre Stevenson, because the Bears are giving up 23.6 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. And Ramondre, past couple weeks, almost 3 out of the last 4 weeks over 20 DraftKings points. So Ramondre at 6,400, he's in a good matchup, but he is a dog in this one. And he gets decent passing, where he got 5 targets, 3 targets, 3 targets, 4 targets, 5 targets. So he's been getting decent targets. He's been getting like close to 4 or 5 targets a game for most of the season. So Ramondre will be in play even if the game script gets away from New England. Gibson, has not been a factor, just to check to see if he was injured. He has not been a factor, even though, I think the expectation was that he was being brought in to kind of take some work in the passing game. But, just like in Washington, he hasn't really been a factor. Another guy that might be interesting is Hunter Hunter Hurst Helmsley. Hunter Henry might be interesting this week. He is in a matchup where Chicago's given up 11 DraftKings points a game to the tight end position, and he's been getting a lot of targets since Drake May took over. 8 targets last week, 6 the week before that, 9 the week before that. And he's been getting decent targets throughout the season, with or without May. But, waiting for a breakout week with May. He scored over double-digit points a few times, almost in 4 out of the last 4 weeks, and he's only 3,900. So that's pretty cheap for Hunter Henry. If you're looking for a stacking partner, if you're looking for maybe like a run back, if you're going to put any of these Bears in and you want to get a New England guy, Hunter Henry might be the better guy to get in there. As far as the defense, I think the Bears defense is going to be the chalk this week. there's plenty of other teams under that 3K mark that have just as good matchups as the Bears, and we'll dig into that when we get into the lineup build. Buffalo versus Indy. Josh Allen. Indy's been pretty good matchup throughout the season. They're giving up 17.7 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. That sets up Josh Allen to have a decent game. They've also been weak against tight ends, giving up 15.6 DraftKings points a game. So that would make Dalton Kincaid interesting as well. Let's check out what Allen's done recently. Yeah, Allen's been on fire, hitting over 20 DraftKings points. He hasn't had a lot of those weeks over 30, but he had a couple in the beginning of the season. He hasn't had one since week 4, basically, and he doesn't really have a ton of weapons to throw to. I think his skid might be kind of linked in here with Cook's usage. Cook has had the best season of his career. He had 28 DraftKings points against Miami in week 2. He had 31 the other week against Seattle. But he's been getting a lot more of the work in the red zone and the goal lines and stuff that might be taking away some of the output that we usually see from Josh Allen. We see Cook had 2 touchdowns versus Seattle. He had 1 versus Tennessee, 1 versus Houston. And then he's had a few others. So, the touchdown scoring by Cook is definitely going to be putting a ding on Josh Allen. Problem with Cook is he's not consistent enough to be a 7K guy. He has upside, but he's not really consistent. So he doesn't really have that floor necessarily, but he does have the upside. He's at 7K though. As far as the matchup, Indy is giving up 22.9 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. The better matchup is for Jonathan Taylor because Buffalo's giving up 28 DraftKings points a game to the running back position. Jonathan Taylor only $500 more than Cook. Jonathan Taylor, he's been pretty good. He's scored close to 20 points in most weeks, and then he had that 29.5 ceiling week against Chicago, and we find him here in a cushy matchup against Buffalo, but it's a game where they should be playing from behind, unfortunately, which puts a little bit of uncertainty there. But I see a 4.5 point spread in this one. At least that's what it was earlier in the week. Let me double check on that spread. See if it's changed since the beginning of the week here. 3.5 points. So it's actually gotten tighter. So we're looking at a 3.5 point spread. Questionable here is going to be Amari Cooper. That's going to be a big questionable mark here for the Bills side. Not really sure how close he is to playing. He's let's see. If he is out this week, that's going to make Khalil Shakir very interesting because Shakir is a very efficient pass catcher. You can see it, like he catches basically everything thrown to him, and that's going to be key here with Josh Allen in a game that has a 3.5 point spread. We're looking at Indy giving up 12.3 DraftKings points to the slot. That's where Shakir runs most of his routes, and that's a middling matchup. But if Josh Allen is leaning on Shakir, he may also be leaning on Kincaid too if Cooper is out. Kincaid has the best matchup, as I mentioned, but he really hasn't been targeted that much. A couple weeks ago, he was super cheap on FanDuel. He was like 4K on FanDuel against Seattle, I think. And I ended up starting him that week. 4K is like a, almost a stone min on FanDuel. So that was a good opportunity to grab him on FanDuel. His salary here on DraftKings this week is $4,900. That's a little bit pricier than I'd like, considering how much work he's gotten this year. What's also interesting is Pittman is out this week. He's been struggling with a bad back, and looks like he's been fighting to stay in, but looks like they're finally going to put him on the bench this week. That's going to make things interesting for Josh Downs. Josh Downs, 9 targets in 3 of the last 4 weeks. Almost 9 targets in every week this season. There's been 2 weeks where he didn't hit at least 9 targets, and that's going to make Downs probably very chalky this week. Let's get an idea of Downs' chalk. I'm seeing Downs at 25.7% ownership. So Downs is going to be chalky this week. Alternative options that might do well with Pittman out is Adonai Mitchell, AD Mitchell. He hasn't really done anything. Like earlier in the year, though, like he was getting on the separator list a lot. Jordan Van Eck puts out a separator list on guys that are able to separate the most in coverage, and Adonai Mitchell was, he was one of the top guys on that list. So he has the ability to separate, and with no Pittman this week, that's going to make things very open the door up significantly for Adonai Mitchell to make an impact. He's at 3,400. Might also be good for Pierce. Pierce is one of these guys, these boomer bust guys. He hasn't done too much like the last few weeks, but he has these moments where he scores like 25 DraftKings points, 24 DraftKings points, 16 DraftKings points. He's at 4,900 though. I think if I was going for one of those guys, I'd probably go with Mitchell and try for Mitchell to have a ceiling game in this one as opposed to Smith. Although the wideouts are only getting 15.5 DraftKings points a game from Buffalo, so really not a good matchup for the wideouts in general. But the 3.5 point spread is interesting to me, and then also having Pittman out is interesting as well. I wonder if there's any defensive injuries on the Bills side that is causing that. The only guy that's out, apart from the questionable tag on Amari Cooper, is Keon Coleman is out. So Keon Coleman is officially out. Amari Cooper is questionable. So that's on the Bills side. As far as the Colts side, the only guy I see out is Michael Pittman. So yeah, I don't see any other reason for that tight spread. So that's interesting. But like I said, receivers, Downs, he's going to be heavily owned, but he's going to be in a good situation. Shakir, if Cooper is out, I like Shakir a lot. Even if Cooper is in, Shakir is going to be probably getting a little bit more targets with Coleman being out. So we got a good situation brewing there for Shakir. And you got a good situation brewing for Downs this week. All right, so Minnesota versus Jacksonville. This is a game where we're looking at a 47.5 point total with Minnesota as 6.5 point favorites in this one. We got Trevor Lawrence out in this one, and that is going to make Mac Jones in play at 4,400. Veteran quarterback coming in a situation where he's starting against, he's starting against a tough defense. They blitz a lot in Minnesota, but Mac Jones, played for New England. His rookie year, Flores was the head coach of Miami. So let's take a look and see what Mac Jones did against Miami with, like a defense that was probably set up pretty similar to, what Flores is continuing to do. Mac Jones, in his first game against Miami, had 281 yards and a touchdown. And his second game, he had 261 yards and a touchdown against them. If we could get 281 yards and a touchdown out of Mac Jones, that sets up to be about 16 DraftKings points. If we added any rushing yardage in there, could be about 17-point game for Mac Jones at 4,400, which would make him interesting. Some guy, like a guy that we want to keep in our player pool, maybe not one that we lean on, but he's definitely going to make things interesting in Jacksonville. Sam Darnold on the other side has a really good matchup. Jacksonville is giving up 23.4 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position. That's like the second highest out of all the teams. So really good matchup for Sam Darnold this week. The question is, with Sam Darnold, is Jacksonville going to be able to keep pace with them? Justin Jefferson is going to be in a situation where Jacksonville is giving up 27.4 DraftKings points a game to wideouts. Justin Jefferson is almost 9K, though, and it's a game where he might not get a full workload if they take a lead too soon. We don't know how they're going to take the lead. And Jefferson has yet to hit 30 points this year, but he's definitely capable of it. It just depends on the type of volume that they're going to get in this game against Jacksonville. If Jacksonville can keep it competitive, then that would be very interesting for the passing game on the Minnesota side. But in the meantime, Aaron Jones has a pretty good matchup. The Jacksonville's defense is giving up 27.9 DraftKings points a game to running backs. So that's another good matchup on the Minnesota side. The problem is Christian Darrisaw is out on the offensive line, and that is going to, it's going to hinder, Jones's rushing upside, and not having one of the key components of the offensive line. But, he's going to have the opportunity for sure. And let's check out and see what his ownership is. It's going to be the highest guy on the slate at 30% ownership. So, I mean, if you're looking for a case to go against Aaron Jones, you could build a case, saying that maybe without Darrisaw as the in the offensive line, maybe Jones does a little bit less. You see a couple of these weeks, 12 DraftKings points, 11 DraftKings points. We probably need more than 20 DraftKings points, 6 DraftKings points, 17. Like last time he had a big week was week 3. So keep that in mind with Aaron Jones. He has a great matchup, but he's going to be chalky. ETN returned last week. This guy's been a disappointment all year. And on top of that, Minnesota's got the strongest, one of the strongest run defenses in the league. So I'm really not interested in anyone on the Jacksonville side here. Jefferson, as I mentioned, he's going to be in a great matchup, but he's expensive. And I don't know if he's going to get the volume we need for him to pay off that salary. Jordan Addison, 5,300. He's more reasonable. If you wanted to take the argument that maybe Jordan Addison takes advantage of that pass game work and gets the big game as the receiver, then Jordan Addison is only 5,300 in that same matchup as Jefferson. Brian Thomas, he's been good this year. He's at 6,600 though, and I'm not sure how he's going to perform with Mac Jones. That's a little bit pricey. As far as Minnesota, they're giving up 25.9 DraftKings points a game to wideouts and 21.5 to slots. So it's a good matchup for pass catchers. So, Robinson, he has the matchup. He's listed as questionable. He's been practicing limited practices. So if you had some hesitation on Brian Robinson, this Washington guy is, I believe he's taken over the slot. He had 6 targets last week and 4 targets the week before that. There's another guy under 4K. See if I can get an idea of his ownership, see if he's on anyone's radar. Parker Washington is going to be less than 1% owned. as far as his projection goes. So if he's the main slot guy and he's coming in against a blitz-happy team with Mac Jones as the quarterback, coming off of a long hiatus as being the starting quarterback. Let's go back to this tab. Let's see where Mac Jones was throwing it against Miami in those matchups that he had against them. All right, so the guys getting the targets were Jacoby Myers, who was the slot receiver for New England, and Hunter Henry, who the tight end. So, that kind of lines up pretty well with what we would want to pair him with in that lower scoring game against Miami. He targeted Jacoby Myers 6 times, Aguilar 5 times, and then he targeted his running back and tight end 6 and 5 times. So seems like slots and tight ends were who he was targeting, when he was facing Flores last time. But that, keep in mind that was in 2021. But, it gives us a little bit of insight on where Mac Jones might go in a blitz situation. So Parker Washington as a slot receiver under 4K is interesting, and a cheap pairing with Mac Jones if you want to get super cheap with your stack. Evan Ingram would be the other interesting guy if you wanted to double stack. Minnesota's only allowing 9.6 DraftKings points a game to tight end, so maybe not so much Ingram, but I do like Washington this week. I also like Hawkinson this week. Hawkinson, Jacksonville's given up 13.3 DraftKings points a game to tight ends. Hawkinson's only 4,700, and he looked pretty good last week when he made his season debut coming off of that ACL tear. He got taken out at the knees at one point in that game too, and he just like stood right back up like a beast. So Hawkinson in a good matchup in a game where we might not want to pay up for Justin Jefferson in fear of volume concerns. Maybe TJ Hawkinson is a good guy that we could use in a cheap bring back in this game if we want to put in a Mac Jones stack. So let's keep that in mind as we move on to this next game. We got Denver versus Kansas City. This is a division game. Let's look at Mahomes' history against Denver here. Because on the surface, people might say, oh, like Kansas City's got a tough defense, blah, blah, blah. So does Denver. But these are two teams that are familiar with each other. So let's look at the past few games that they've played each other. We're talking about Denver scored 24 points against them in week 14. Week 8 last year. It was a 19-8 score the week before that, or the game before that. In 2022, saw a 27-24 score and a 34-28 score. Those were with Russell Wilson, obviously. But, Denver's been capable of putting up points against Kansas City, and a lot of it has to do with familiarity between the two teams. I wouldn't write them off. I think they're definitely interesting. If you're, especially a week like this, where it could be one of those games where nobody's expecting to go off, but they're playing in Denver, or actually, let me confirm that. They might be playing in Kansas City. I think I'm wrong with that. Yeah, they're playing in Kansas City. So it's going to be a tough matchup for Denver, but they always have the possibility of a division game, being higher scoring than we might expect. Interesting pieces would be Cortland Sutton against Kansas City. Kansas City's missing one of its cornerbacks. Let's see, which cornerback are they missing? All right, we're taking a look at the Chiefs here. Jalen Watson is the guy that they're missing. He's he's a starting right cornerback. That's a significant injury. That's going to leave him susceptible on the right side of the field. I'm trying to get a look at where Courtland Sutton lines up here. Courtland Sutton lines primarily on the left side of the field, so he's going to be facing off against that weak matchup throughout the game, and that could be a pretty good matchup for Courtland Sutton this week. He's probably going to have minimal ownership. He's at 5,600 for the primary starting receiver for the Broncos. Bo Nix has been playing pretty decent, but maybe not so much as a passer. 206 yards. He's more of a running quarterback, but at 6K, I don't hate the play with the upside that he's had, scoring all these weeks over 20 DraftKings points. But Courtland Sutton is kind of interesting too. I'm not going to go crazy like putting guys from this game on, but DeAndre Hopkins is going to be chalky this week, even though he's got a tough matchup against Denver. Denver is giving up 19.4 DraftKings points a game to the wideouts and 12.6 to slots. So I would be cautious about DeAndre Hopkins, even though he's at 5,300. He had that big game against Tampa Bay, but Tampa Bay was a very soft matchup. DeAndre Hopkins, they have a lot more tape on him now in that Kansas City offense. So not as excited about Hopkins in this matchup as when I had him in the captain last week. Other than that, not really seeing too much else. Sorry about the noise. My wife keeps opening the garage. The matchup for the tight ends on the Denver side are interesting. Kansas City's been weak against tight end all season long. They're giving up 17.4 DraftKings points a game to tight end position, and both Troutman and Krull are under 3K. So if you had a lean on one of these guys, Troutman had 1 target last week, 4 targets a week before that, 3 targets a week before that. He had that 18.5 DraftKings point game. Meanwhile, Krull, looking at a couple weeks with 4 targets. Let's see which one of these guys is getting the most. Let's look over at Fantasy Pros and see which one of these guys is getting the most work at tight end. All right, so Troutman's getting 61% snaps. Yeah, Troutman would be the guy that we want. So if you want to take a chance on one of these tight ends against one of the weaker defenses versus tight ends in the league, we're looking at Adam Troutman at 2,800. So that's a super cheap option for us if we're looking for salary relief. Other than that, not a whole lot I'm interested in here. I don't see any other really matchups that stand out. The slot receiver for Denver, does stand out a little bit, and that is Devon Bailey. Kansas City's been giving up 15.2 DraftKings points a game to the slot receivers. So Bailey would be interesting in that situation. If you think that this game could go higher than projected, Bailey's at 3,400. And he's the primary slot receiver, 3 targets, 3 targets, 3 targets, 6 targets, and 8 targets. So, he hasn't been getting a ton of targets, but he is a guy that would be interesting. Franklin, let's look at Franklin. 4 targets, 2 targets, 6 targets, 3 targets. He hasn't done it too much. Vele, there was a lot of talk by Sean Payton, about getting the younger guys more involved. And that was a couple weeks ago when they were on the showdown slate. But I wouldn't be surprised to see, Vele get some work at 3,400 in the slot in that weak matchup against in that facing off against the weak part of the Kansas City defense. So keep that in mind with Vele. All right, let's move on to Atlanta versus New Orleans. This is another interesting game because the total on this is a lot, or the spread on this is a lot closer than I would imagine. We're looking at a 3.5 point spread, 46.5 point total in this one. I would figure like Atlanta to be a lot higher, based on the injuries that New Orleans has sustained. New Orleans has lost both of its, main wide receivers. Olave's out. Rashid is on IR. They also down Bub Means. Bub Means is out. Cedric Wilson is out. Like they're missing half their wide receivers. They just fired their head coach. Maybe they're expecting some sort of a head coach bounce in this one. Kamara should be, used pretty heavily, but he's banged up. And he had 30 attempts last week, basically, and 9 targets. Like Kamara could see a huge workload. Let's look at he's the second highest owned guy in the slate, too, on top of it. But Kamara could see a huge workload. He's a guy that's worth leaving in the player pool. He's expensive, though, at 8,100. That is expensive. Jamal Williams on top of it. I think he's questionable in the game. I'm not sure if he's at practice on Friday. So he's questionable. I don't know if he's going to play. So with no Jamal Williams, that's going to open the door for Taysom Hill at 4K. Another one of these cheap tight end options. He had 16 DraftKings points last week. I would not be surprised to see him have a big week, big usage week this week. They're going to need him. If I'm looking at ownership, I don't see the ownership's not that bad. Like he's under 15%. So yeah, Taysom Hill at 4K in a game where they're missing virtually all their weapons, and we got a new head coach coming in. Taysom Hill is going to be interesting, but so is Juwan Johnson. Could be another week where you want to stack, a couple tight ends if you're looking for value to get in some of the stud running backs and maybe a stud receiver. But Juwan Johnson at 3,300, he's interesting too. I'm liking a lot of tight ends this week, and it's a week where nothing really stands out as far as the game environment. For wide receivers, Drake London is questionable. Looks like he said after Friday's practice that he felt good about coach felt good about London playing. He hurt his hip in that last game, but that just makes me interested in Darnell Mooney. Mooney had 9 targets, 6 targets, 8 targets the last 3 weeks. He had 16 targets for his Tampa Bay. He's been getting a ton of targets from Kirk Cousins loves him. At 6,500, I could see him having a decent game this week. So yeah, Darnell Mooney is in a good spot this week as well. As far as the points that the Falcons are giving up, they're giving up 23.9 DraftKings points a game to wideouts, and they just got rid of Marshawn Lattimore. I'm sorry, Kansas City's giving up, or New Orleans is giving up 16.7 DraftKings points a game to the wideout position. So that's not a great matchup, but they just got rid of Lattimore. So expect that to be a lot better. Good job, bud. You got them all on there. Good job. I'll be down a little bit. So Darnell Mooney is definitely going to be in play this week. Let's see. As far as other matchups, New Orleans is Also giving up 17.1 to the slot receivers. That's going to put Ray McLeod on the radar this week. He is $4,300 receiver. He was getting a lot more targets earlier in the year. But we also got, let's see, Bijan Robinson in a good matchup. Bijan is facing off against a defense that's given up 25 DraftKings points a game. And the total on this, the spread on this is just weird. I would expect Atlanta to be heavier favorites on it. If they do end up playing decent in this game, with a lead throughout the game, Bijan Robinson will definitely be in play if you think that's how the game plays out. Let's see what kind of ownership he's looking at. He's looking at about 22% ownership. Problem is, if they take a significant enough lead, that's going to put Algier in the game, 5,200. Not really much upside to turn to him, and not much value there either. So Bijan, Kamara, Darnell Mooney, and the tight ends for the New Orleans side and Taysom Hill and Juwan Johnson are the guys I'd be most interested in this game. Derek Carr's only 5,300. If you do think that this game is going to be kept close, then Derek Carr might be interesting stack with one of those tight ends. But I'm not even going to go there. I don't even want to suggest that. All right, let's check out San Francisco versus Tampa Bay. San Francisco Tampa Bay is a game where we're looking at a 50.5 point total, with San Francisco as 5.5 point favorites in this one. Tampa Bay obviously has been decimated with injuries. They're missing Evans. They're missing Godwin. On top of that, let's see, McMillan. McMillan was out last week. I don't know if he's going to be back yet this week. He's still listed at questionable. He's coming back from a hamstring injury, though, so I don't really like to see that. Shepard was getting a lot of those targets. Shepard played a role in Tampa Bay scoring that last touchdown of the game that sent it to overtime and cost me $118K. So I don't have warm and fuzzies feelings towards Sterling Shepard, but he is he's off the injury report. He'd been on it the last few weeks with a hamstring or something. As far as San Francisco, they're giving up only 10.4 DraftKings points a game to the slot and 15.9 to wideouts. So not really good matchups there for any of the Tampa Bay receivers, but their middling matchup against tight ends, they're giving up 10.2 DraftKings points a game, but tight ends have been having a tough time scoring touchdowns against them. On the Tampa Bay side, I think it'll be kind of passing to running backs for the majority of this game. And we've seen White and Irving heavily involved in the pass game. A couple weeks there with 6 targets for White. He had 3 targets last week. As far as Irving, 7 targets a couple weeks ago. He's had a bunch of weeks with 3 targets. I wouldn't be surprised if we see them trying to drive it down the field with the running backs and the tight end. And there's really not anyone in the passing game that has stood out. As far as the San Francisco side, though, Purdy's going to be in a good matchup. Tampa Bay's giving up 23.6 DraftKings points a game to Purdy. They're giving up 26.5 to the running back position, so that's good for Christian McCaffrey coming back from IR. They're giving up 25.8 to wideouts. There's a lot of ownership, I think, that's going to be on Let's look at Purdy's ownership this week. Purdy's going to be the highest owned quarterback at 16%. And let's see, Debo's under 10% owned. Let's check out Kittle. Maybe Kittle's the one getting the ownership. Kittle's going to be at about 14% owned. So there's not a ton of ownership on the passing game other than Purdy. Like, I don't know who people are stacking Purdy with, but Juwan Jennings comes back too. I think this might be Juwan Jennings' first game without Ayuk. He's been out since week 6, but you saw that monster game that Jennings put up in week 3. He put up 49.5 DraftKings points in week 3. I would imagine he comes right back in and steps into his role. The Super Bowl, the only guy who performed in the Super Bowl for them, and he's just been consistent as their wide receiver 3. I don't think that Pearsall is just going to come in here and take over for Jennings. So, Jennings in this matchup at 5,100 is interesting. Samuel is interesting at 6,900. So we got, like a couple interesting guys. Other than that, like, I don't really like anyone too much in the passing game, other than Kittle, who's going to be, like a little bit expensive and highly owned, but Tampa Bay is giving up. Let's see. Tampa Bay is giving up 15.5 DraftKings points a game to tight end position. So just everyone in the passing game has good matchups against them. The question is going to be, is Baker going to be able to keep pace with them this week? And I don't know if they're going to be able to against San Francisco. 50.5 point total, though. 5.5 point spread in this one. So Baker should be throwing it. But he's at 6,400 still. So, tough to pull the trigger on that one. Tennessee versus the Chargers. Herbert's been playing a lot better recently. His past couple games, his past few games, he's been over 349 yards in one of those. He's been around 280 in the other two. But he's had 1 week over 24 DraftKings points, and then 1 week around 20, 5,200. He's still cheap for Justin Herbert. And he's facing off against a Tennessee defense that's a little bit more difficult. They made a lot of moves in the offseason to pick up some key defensive members. They're only giving up 15.5 DraftKings points a game to the wideouts, 12.8 to slots, and 9 DraftKings points to tight ends. But they've been giving up 15.8, which is middling to the quarterback position. They've also been giving up 22.8 to the running back. So I think could be more of a J.K. Dobbins week. They're playing in LA, so they're home favorites by over a touchdown. Let's see what Dobbins' ownership is. J.K. Dobbins, he's down way under 10%. So J.K. Dobbins is interesting this week in this matchup where they should be playing with a lead. He hasn't done anything much recently, which actually he had 24.5 DraftKings points last week. 7,200 though. That's probably what's keeping his ownership down. He's had some big weeks this year. Don't know if it's enough to justify 7,200 though. We need about 28 DraftKings points out of him to pay off that salary. He has not gotten there. Tony Pollard. Not a huge fan of Pollard this week, even though it looks like what's his face? Tajay Spears. Is he going to be back this week? Yeah, Tajay Spears doesn't have a designation this week. So Tajay is going to be back. Yeah, it's going to pull away from Tony Pollard, and he's already up there close to 7K. So maybe a fade on those running backs. Quentin Johnson, he's still under 5K. He's been having a lot of good weeks with Herbert in this new offense. We saw him hit 25 DraftKings points last week against Cleveland, and he had 22 earlier in the season. He went through a little stretch there. Like, he scored a few games with touchdowns this year, 4 touchdowns total. He missed a few games, after he was on that little hot streak. But now he comes back against Cleveland last week and scores 25 DraftKings points. And this week he faces off against a tougher Tennessee defense. But he's, like I said, under 5K is not a bad price to pay for him, even if the matchup isn't great. And other than that, I don't see anyone else interesting in this game. So let's move on to this next one. Jets versus Arizona. This is a game, that is a little bit interesting because we're talking about a spread here of 1.5 points. It's a 46.5 point total. If we're looking for a game where, they're going to keep it, it's supposed to stay tight, and we got two teams that have offensive firepower. One of them's been underperforming, obviously, with Arizona, but the Jets, they've been underperforming too. But a lot of their games they've lost by one score. We could be talking about a completely different Jets team if a few of those games have swung their way. Rodgers has been pretty decent, though. You've seen 18 DraftKings points, 17 DraftKings points, and 20 DraftKings points in 3 of the last 4 weeks. And he hasn't been as bad as the publicity on him is, and he's 5,700, and he has stacking partners in Garrett Wilson and Devontae Adams. Both those dudes are over 7K, unfortunately. But the Cardinals are giving up 20.4 DraftKings points a game to wideouts and 14.6 to the slot. Adams was working out of the slot last week, and I think they want to have him more as a slot receiver. So, both, Adams and Wilson are going to have good matchups, and they're not going to be really cannibalizing each other. Marvin Harrison, a couple weeks ago, they were talking about how, Kyler had asked him what routes he likes, and they started to work those in. And then last week they went right back to the old stale routes, and he only scored 4 DraftKings points. So, it's impossible to tell what we're going to get with these guys. On top of that, they're facing off against a defense that's been smothering. As far as DraftKings points allowed, they've allowed 15.2 to wideouts and 8.1 to slot receivers. So it's very tough to trust Kyler Murray to get it to Harrison if we wanted to do some sort of a stack. McBride might be the better stacking partner in this one, but tight ends have a bad matchup too because they're only giving up 9 DraftKings points a game to tight ends. So, very tough one. Another tough game here, even though the total, the spread is very tight. Philly versus Dallas. They lost Prescott for at least the next few weeks. I think he's going to be going on IR, or if he hasn't gone on IR already. Hurts has been on fire. The problem with Hurts is he keeps taking our touchdowns away from Barkley when I want to start him. But Hurts has scored over 20 DraftKings points for 4 weeks straight. Let's get an idea what Hurts ownership is this week. Jalen Hurts is way down at under 2% owned. And I understand that the matchup is not suggesting that it's going to be, like a lot of passing work done by Philly. And we got a low total at 41.5 points. Philly are 7-point favorites. But how often do we see it where they get to that goal line, and then, he comes in there and poaches those touchdowns away from Barkley. What's Barkley's ownership? Barkley is at 10.4% owned. So, I like Hurts or Barkley in this. I think it makes sense to get one of those guys in, most of your lineups this week. The matchup is just too good. Like, Dallas has given up 20 DraftKings points a game to the quarterback position, 27.3 to running backs, 21.1 to wideouts, and 14.8 to the slot. So basically, you can pick your poison here with Philadelphia, with whichever weapons you want to use there. You get an idea of the man versus zone situation on this. All right, let's check out man versus zone here. All right, so Dallas is running, the sixth highest rate of man coverage, which lends itself to, I'm sorry, that's the Eagles are running the sixth highest rate of man coverage. I'll cover that while I'm looking at it. That would be CeeDee Lamb. He's what was it? Fourth among 71 qualifying wide receivers against man coverage. So CeeDee Lamb is really good against man. Problem is he's got Cooper Rush throwing to him this week, but he hasn't really done anything with Dak. So maybe it would be an opportunity for, like a fresh start for him. As far as Dallas, they're really middling on both sets. So, it's nothing that favors, AJ Brown too much. Devontae Smith, Devontae Smith might be a good pivot. Let's see what the ownership here is on Smith versus Brown, if there is ownership on him. Seems pretty low on all these other guys. Yeah, I mean, they're both going to be minimal. Looking at 0.5% for AJ Brown, and same for Devontae Smith. So Eagles are super low owned here against Dallas, even though it's a great matchup. That is definitely interesting. Let's take a look at Cooper Rush here. I'm pretty sure that Cooper Rush has faced Philly in at least a few starts. All right, so how many starts does he have against the Eagles? His last one was back in week 6 of 2022. 181 yards, 1 touchdown, 3 interceptions. Not great, but yeah, just not that interesting. Cooper Rush, though, he is one of those veteran guys that could come in and do decent. The problem with Philadelphia's defense has been on fire recently. Talked about it, closer to the beginning of the year, how Vic Fangio's defenses are going to take a few weeks to get accustomed to for the defense, and they're going to look bad in the beginning, but then once they look good, they're going to be dominant. And we're seeing that with Philly's defense recently. 28-23 last week against Jacksonville, 37-17 against Cincy, good team there. 28-3 against the Giants, nothing surprising there. They held the Browns to 16 points. Tampa Bay was the game right before their bye, where they got killed by Tampa Bay. But since they've come back from their bye, they've had their shit together. So, I don't I don't know if Dallas is going to be able to put up much of a fight against them. Lamb is 8,600 on top of that. He has not justified a price like that, so I don't know why he's so high priced. All right, let's take a look at building a lineup here. Make sure to hit that like button. Give me the 30 likes to trigger the short video, and make sure to subscribe to the channel. I need about 80 subscribers to hit 1,200. You're going to want to subscribe to get the alerts for when the short videos and the other videos come out. So make sure to hit that subscribe button. All right, so let's take a look here on a direction that maybe we can go. Let's go with that Mac Jones situation. Let's take a look here. We got Mac Jones at 4,400. You know, in a week where no quarterback really stands out, I don't mind putting a 4,400 Mac Jones in there. And we wanted to put him with Parker Washington. So let's put him in there with Parker Washington. On the Minnesota side, I wanted to run it back with Hawkinson. All right, so that's three guys right there that are going to be really cheap for us and leave us with 66. You have 6,100 per guy. Let's look at our defense. Defense, I'm just looking for the cheapest defense that makes sense. Bucks for San Francisco, Indy, Tennessee versus the Chargers, New Orleans versus Atlanta, Jets versus Arizona. I don't hate. Chicago, New England. I would take Jets versus Arizona over a chalky Chicago versus New England. Let's go with the Jets. As far as our running backs, let's put in Barkley. And for our other tight end, I want to put in Taysom Hill. Let's get Taysom Hill in that flex spot. That's another cheap guy for us. A lot of people might turn to the cheaper wide receivers this week, but I think there's too many tight ends that are underpriced that give us an opportunity to kind of differentiate from the field too. So let's get those two tight ends in there. If we got those two tight ends in there, we can probably afford. We can probably afford Jefferson, but let's take a look here and make sure that get what we want. So running backs, I don't hate putting McCaffrey in there, like just with that matchup that they have against Tampa Bay. Dobbins, I don't mind. Oh, DeAndre Swift, he's the other matchup that I really liked. Let's get Swift in there and see what that gets us for receivers. That gets us 7,600 per guy. I like Wilson. Talked about the Jets matchup. It's going to leave us with 8,100. In that situation, you know, we got an option like Devontae Smith. Let's see. Marvin Harrison's only 6,400. I didn't realize he was that cheap. Let's get Mooney in here. This is a 1,600. You know, maybe we can get Washington out. You know, these are options like Odunze, Gabe Davis for a Jacksonville stack. Let's get Parker back in there. It's a little bit. I don't don't think we necessarily need Mooney. If we have 8,100 for wideouts, still in the same spot. Like Devontae Smith would probably be the best option. And then we're just hoping that, here, let's get Barkley out. If we put Kamara in there, we're putting in the chalkier guy. But we could put Kamara or we could put McCaffrey in there. McCaffrey's ownership will probably be pretty low. We can basically get any one of these stud like running backs in here, but let's put Kamara in there. This is 8,300. That puts us in Brown range. If we wanted to get Kamara out of there, let's put in Jefferson. We got Jefferson and Hawkinson going against Washington and Jones, kind of like that. And then running back, we need our final running back. Puts us in Breece Hall range. That would correlate with our Jets defense. Jonathan Taylor in that matchup against Buffalo. Let's say we put in Hall and we swap out Wilson. I mean, we could swap out Wilson for Samuel if we wanted to get exposure to the San Francisco game. You could always leave Wilson or put Adams in there too. There's a few guys that I like in this range that make sense. If you wanted to run back on that Jets side, you could put Harrison in there. You could put Mooney in there. All those guys have good matchups. I don't think you can really go wrong with most of the guys in this stretch here. So, that's one interesting way to go. Let's take out Mac Jones. Let's say we wanted to do, let's do a Drake May. Let's get Drake May in that captain or in that quarterback position. If we put Drake May in there, I wanted to stack him with Hunter Henry. That leaves us with 6,600. We don't need Washington in that situation. Going to leave us with 5,200 per guy. And if we're at 5,200 per guy, let's see if we can find like a cheap guy. Let's get Noah Brown. Noah Brown was the cheap guy that I liked this week, 4,300. This leaves us with 6,200 for our last wide receiver. Let's see where that leaves us. That puts us in Downs range. Downs would be the the chalk way to go on that. We got May to Henry, and we're running it back with Swift. So we got our game covered there with New England. We got Breece Hall and the Jets D correlated. Atlanta, we got Taysom Hill. Maybe we'd want to put Mooney in this one. He's a little bit pricey. We could probably go down on that Jets D. Go down from that Jets D. Let's see. Let's get Mooney. That would leave us with our options. Looking at the Colts, the Bucks, Jacksonville. Denver, I don't hate Denver at 2,400. Division game against Kansas City. Kansas City's offense has been bad this year. I know they got DeAndre Hopkins last week, but Denver's the toughest defense in the league. I wouldn't be surprised to see Denver, do decent in this one. New England would also be an option, but we got Drake May in there, so probably not in this particular lineup. But there are options down there, but you can kind of see some directions to go. If you wanted to go, a different direction, let's go with a more expensive quarterback. Let's say we want to put in Jalen Hurts and get that super low owned stack going. Let's put him with AJ Brown to start. And let's get Barkley in there too. All right, so let's go to defense here. Let's get that Broncos D. I can already tell we're going to need salary relief. Let's get Hawkinson and Taysom Hill in there. All right, so we're looking at 4,800 per guy. Let's get our other running back in there before we run out of money. Looking for a cheap running back. That makes sense. Najee Harris makes sense. Stevenson Swift. Let's get Swift in there. All right, so that leaves us with $4K per guy, and we could get in Noah Brown. Leaves us with 3,800 for our last guy. $3,800 would put us in. This is the guy catching the deep balls, Raheem Jarrett, for Tampa Bay, but he did not do too much. Calvin Austin, he's a guy that's shown some upside this year. 20 DraftKings points just last week. He's at 3,500. Miller is the guy that caught that touchdown to send it into overtime. I was recommending him on the show last week. He was at a 1K salary. He ended up coming through, getting in the winning lineup. I just didn't have him in my my lineup. Mitchell, 3,400 with Pittman out. That's another interesting one. Vele, I went over. A lot of interesting options here. And let's do that where we put in Mitchell. And let's see if we can get better than Noah Brown. I do like Noah Brown though, but I just want to see what else options we'd have. Tipton should get decent opportunity with all the injuries. Pearsall, Noah Brown's my favorite in this range. We just don't know with Pearsall how much work he's going to get with Juwan Johnson back or Juwan Jennings back. Juwan Jennings is 5,100, so we can't quite get there. Let's go back to Brown. I'm going to try something. We go back to Brown. Let's get a cheap receiver with him. Let's go back with Parker Washington. That one we can't do that. It doesn't leave us enough money. We're going to go cheaper than 3,900. Calvin Austin. Let's go with Mitchell. If we go with Mitchell, then our defense, we're left with 2,800. Gives us a few more options. If you don't want to use the Broncos versus the Chiefs, but I don't hate using the Broncos versus the Chiefs. And that gives us a pretty good option here with an expensive guy, expensive stack in Hurts to Barkley and Brown. Don't have a run back in it, but it doesn't really bother me. It could be one of these ones where they just squash them. We got Noah Brown in there. We got DeAndre Swift. We got Hawkinson. If we're going with Swift, maybe instead of Hawkinson, we go with Henry and see what that does. And let's put in that cheap defense. Let's put in the Chiefs again, or the Broncos again, just to see where that would leave us with our final receiver spot. Tipton leaves us in that weird range again. Let's put Mitchell back in there. Let's take out Brown. Gives us 5,500. This range, we have options like DeAndre Hopkins, Jordan Addison, Rome Odunze. I kind of like this range better. And that was just by swapping from Hawkinson to Henry. But, get a few different directions there. Hit the like button. Give me the 30 likes. 30 likes will trigger the shorter video. I have more complete thoughts when I do a little bit more research. Usually I just, I just do my initial going through the player pool and, figuring out the injury situations and, the analytics behind who has the best matchups and everything like that before I start digging in and thinking more along the lines of, like looking at where all the ownership might be accumulating and which might be the pivots to go to and stuff like that. But I incorporate all that into my thoughts on the short videos. So make sure to hit the like button, give me the 30 so that I can put out that short video, and make sure to hit the like button, the subscribe button. I'm trying to get to 1,200 subscribers by the end of week 10. We're in week 10 now. So if you guys can help me get 80 more subscribers, that'd be great. And that way you can sign up for the alerts for when the videos get posted on YouTube. Other than that, good luck, guys, and I will see you tomorrow. Oh, and by the way, our showdown shows are all up. So I got a showdown show for Germany up, and I got a showdown show for the Sunday night game, which I recorded with Spread. So those are up on the channel already. So check those out, and I'll see you guys tomorrow.